during this workshop, and even if they are not from your department, I want you to pay attention to them, to know them, because you can contact them also. If you have questions about pedagogy, make sure you reach out to them. So I'm going to start with Troy Weiler from Germanic Studies. That's it. These are people you can really reach out to. They really know what is going on in the field of second language acquisition and foreign language acquisition. P.D. Kai from SUS, Central Eurasia. Central Eurasian Studies is where she is the language coordinator there. And Deborah Friedman is not here yet. She will be joining us later. She is in second language studies. We have a department of second language studies also, where you can do research and all kinds of, address all kinds of issues on second language acquisition. We also have Dr. Rebecca Manley from Indian Studies. Then we have Susanette Avon is not here also, but she will be here too in Germanic Studies. She will actually be the one that will be talking to you later this afternoon about how to prepare for your micro teaching tomorrow. So please make sure that you are here to listen to her. And we also have Maria Shadakova from Slavic. Dr. Maria Shadakova is actually also the director of language assessment at our CLE. So she's going to be giving a lot of workshops for you with regards to assessment. So as soon as you see an announcement about her workshop, make sure you attend. There's somebody also who is still not here, Dr. Esther Ham. She's on her way back here. She'll probably join us maybe tomorrow or Friday. She's the director of online language education, also through CLE. And she will be giving you a lot of workshops also if you want to put your language online. She will be here to help you. Then also behind everything that goes on at CLE is Miss Laura Martina. You're going to be seeing her name a lot. She's the face of CLE. She's going to be the one sending you all kinds of notes. Please, when you hear from her, please respond. And she's going to bug you a lot about workshops. She's the one. So thank you so much, Laura. She's the one who's put everything together. Thank you. So, without much further ado, reception. Xiaojing, that's right. Sorry. They are the coordinator of our CELS, Center for Language Technology. You all met her yesterday. She did an amazing job having a whole workshop. So Xiaojing also will be doing, in the course of the year, she's going to also be doing a lot of workshops on technology for you. So what you saw yesterday is not the end. She's going, throughout the year, she's going to be giving you more workshops. So please, and CLE will be also advertising it. The good thing about Xiaojing is that she's not only the coordinator of CELS, she's also a staff at CLE. So you're going to be seeing her from those two angles. Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over to Dr. Maria Shadakova to introduce our guest speaker.
Yes, and it's my pleasure to introduce Laura Tell today, who will be giving a wonderful presentation on national standards and who would set us off with a good foundation for language teaching, and so that our craft would allow us for self-reflection and would allow us to know what exactly we're doing. Because sometimes when you're in classroom, you're so carried away or so swamped by things at hand that you really don't see the big picture. So Laura will give us a big picture, and I hope you will use this big picture when you teach, so that you know what is your final destination, or what is behind your craft and your everyday sometimes tedious and sometimes annoying activities. So they all have meaning. So let me introduce Laura Terrell. She has a long list, and I had to have it cheat sheet so that otherwise where I can remember.
That just means I'm old.
Accomplishments. Yeah, so Laura comes with a very rich background teaching both through all the levels of K-12 as well as university. So she is really, she knows the field in and out. She also served as a director for interim director of curriculum and instruction for the entire school district in St. Louis, Missouri. And Laura also serves as a on two big for two big organizations. One of them is ACTFL. Yes. American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, and the other is a huge conference, Central States Conference on the Teaching of Foreign Languages, and she represents both. She also co-authored of recently published title Act for Kids to Planning for Learning, Effective Curriculum, Unit, and Lesson Design. And on top of all this, she is recognized and received Distinguished Supervisor of the Year Award from the National Supervisors of Foreign Language and Central States Founder Award and the ACTFL Lawrence Sena Award for Lectureship in Foreign Languages.
Like I said, I'm old. You know? Thank you, Maria.
She's modest and
Okay.
yeah.
So my goal today, given to me by Antonia, primarily is to foster a discussion amongst all of us about that bigger picture of language instruction, because I know really well, having taught 22 years in the classroom, K-12, that when the students arrive, the big picture, the big ideas can sort of just disappear, because now you're into the nitty-gritty, you have those students in front of you, and you're trying to figure out how do I meet the needs of all these individual young minds. And can I just say it's a pleasure to be here. I'm a transplant to Indiana from St. Louis, and so I've always known of the reputation of IU, especially since moving into the state. I taught the methods course at IUPUI for a semester, covering for one of the students down here finishing her doctorate, and heard all about all the languages, but it's a pleasure to see them and to know how vibrant it is in this state. My goal today is to make sure that I address your needs and your questions, so I can put together, as all of you will know this fall, the best lesson plan in the world for the day. But if I'm really effective, then I have to allow you as the learners to change the lesson plan, even if we're only 5 to 10 minutes into the lesson plan. And you know that that's going to happen to you more times than not, that your perfectly crafted lesson plan will be destroyed by your students within 10 to 15 minutes. So feel free to interrupt, to ask questions, and even if you so choose to say you're wrong. Because I would much rather you challenge anything I say and get it out in the room so that we can talk about it, rather than to sit there and know something that the rest of us don't that we need. Because I know many of you are more on top of research than I will ever be. So my background, while it has some of the research, is really that background in practicality of what has worked over the years in K-12 and at the university level. So by planning for learning, and the hope today is that by the end of the day, you will have a working framework of the newly revised World Readiness Standards, so formerly called the National Standards. Title was changed to reflect that national implied we were doing something that was just for the United States, and World Readiness, the new term, to imply that no, languages are to prepare our students for the 21st century, And then of immediate concern to those of you that have to micro-teach tomorrow is that ability to put together a short and concise lesson that demonstrates two different principles. One, an ability to stay in the target language, and then the second micro-teaching to be learner-centered. So you can hold me to those standards. I will be staying primarily in English today until I teach you a German lesson later, which should be hilarious. But I wanted to pick a language that maybe not everyone in the room would know. And then tomorrow when I try to teach a learner-centered. However, if I fail in learner-centered and you start to get tired of sitting, you should let me know that I have forgotten to be learner-centered in this morning portion. And then finally, you will design lessons and teach, and then many of us will be giving you feedback on those lessons so that you feel better prepared, hopefully, to start the year. What we really want, no matter what course we teach, is to be part of the bigger picture. When they graduate from IU with whatever type of degree it's going to be, and they exit their last course in language learning, what is the goal for that student? What will they be ready to do? And we have guidelines from APFL through the proficiency guidelines, through the performance goals that tell us what we want our students to be able to do. But I think it's as simple as this picture. What we really want for our students is that no matter how long they engage with us in our classes, is that they feel ready if they hit a real-world language experience to embrace it and enjoy it. And my mission, no matter what group I work with, is to no longer hear American students in the future who say, I took 2 years or 2 semesters or 3 semesters of language, then they take a quiet little step backwards and add, and I can't do anything. Because if we don't convince Americans that they can learn languages, that they can embrace cultures, we're failing in our big picture. We're absolutely failing in our big picture. And when I'm working with K-12 groups, I add, who does better when you take students abroad? Who does better? Do your A students do better at that first cultural experience? Or do your C students do better at the first cultural experience? And what do you think those K-12 educators tell me?
C.
Who does better, the A or the C?
C.
Hands down, they will tell me their C students do better. And then I always say to them, then what's wrong with your grade book? Because if the students who do better in the real world are your C students, then something is wrong in your grade book. So my caution to you as people who give grades is make sure your grades reflect real world ability, because that's our goal. When you put proficiency in an image, that's it. Get out there, do it, and enjoy it. Look for opportunities to use those languages. Now, in order to save the environment, everything that I'm talking about, I've created a wiki space. You can go there. It's my name, L. Terrell, T-E-R-R-I-L-L. I don't know if you have the agenda with it on it or not, but if you just copy that down, I just put IU Orientation, something simple, .wiki spaces. The PowerPoints are there. The proficiency guidelines are there. Everything that I'm going to reference today is there, and if you ask for something throughout the day, then I can just post it there if it's something that I have. If there are articles or materials that you wish to share quickly with each other, I know you have your university systems in place, but as an outside speaker, I can't access them. So this gives me an easy way to post for you for these 3 days. So we'll make sure if you didn't get that, L. Terrell, IU Orientation. And you can follow along with the PowerPoint if you want, so I just don't want you to feel like you have to take notes, because you've got everything that's on the slides is already up there. So there's basically two things that we have to consider when we design a course. What do we want to teach? And how well should the students do? Those are really the two questions. And the real challenge is that the what should not be answered by the textbook. So if your course has a textbook, great. I'm really glad you have a textbook with resources and materials. But as far as I'm concerned, you need to leave it closed until you think about what you really believe your students need to function in the real world. Let me give you an example. I had the great honor to go to Puerto Rico between St. Louis and Indiana. So my husband had lost his job and he had relocated here, and for 3 years he worked in Indiana, 1 year at Terre Haute, 1 year in Lafayette, 1 year in Indianapolis, while I stayed in St. Louis and let our son finish high school. But at the end of the 3rd year in Indianapolis, he said, I've been asked to open a plant in Puerto Rico. Be there for 1.5 years. And I'm thinking, I'm currently working 14-hour days in St. Louis as a director of curriculum and instruction, world language and ESL. And I'm eligible for early retirement in Missouri. Perhaps I should early retire and go to Puerto Rico with him for what the company considered hardship duty. Eli Lilly considered this to be a hardship duty assignment, proving that the private industry does not understand the world of education at all. As part of my hardship duty, they asked me what I wanted, and I said I'd like to be close to a swimming pool, because we knew we were going to be moving inland, not near a beach. So they put one in my backyard, along with the 4,000 square foot home, that they paid for, and gave me, and I said I'd like Spanish lessons, because any former French teacher going to Puerto Rico would of course want Spanish lessons. So they gave me my private Spanish lessons. It was lovely. It was a teacher from Madrid via Venezuela who was now living in Puerto Rico and was relatively convinced that the Puerto Ricans didn't know how to speak Spanish. So she spent many classes correcting that Spanish that I was learning by interacting on the streets. But she had to follow the curriculum of the textbook. She was required to do this by her language center, and my husband's company required that the report card be sent to the company. So I was being graded. Now, this is what I mean about a textbook and what. So we hit the chapter on different types of trucks. Now think about this. I'm trying to live in the interior island. Puerto Rico is not bilingual if you're not in the tourist areas. It is Spanish speaking. And I'm supposed to learn the words for lorry trucks and other types of trucks that I don't even know in English. They're trucks. They're big and they're little and they're I have no idea what they weigh, but I was supposed to practice what they weighed and how much weight they could carry. And I looked at her and I said in my very broken Spanish, could we please skip this chapter? It took some convincing, but she allowed me to skip that chapter. But when we got to the chapter on Spanish commands, and I tried to get her to skip that chapter, I lost. Now think about it. This is still a what question. I, as a non-native speaker of Spanish, have no business telling people what to do in the command form. I should always use would you please, could you. I should always do it with a politeness level that is way beyond ordering you to do something for me. She would not let me skip that command chapter, so I had to work my way through it. I had to do the written exercises on commands. The last time I checked, commands are oral. We only give commands orally. The only people that write commands are textbook authors, are not textbook authors, authors who write dialogue. And I was far from being ready to write a book and include dialogue. So that's why I'm saying it's not that a book is bad. It's just that what is in the book may or may not be relevant to your learner. And as a professional, you have to have something in order to decide, is it worth doing? Because the major goal of a publisher, no matter what level, is to sell the book. And in order to sell the book, the goal is to make everybody happy. To make everybody happy, you put everything in it. And then there's too much to do. So very few people at any course level will ever finish a book. So it is all about making informed choices. And it's the standards that allow us to make those informed choices. I should have given you a little test. Could you just turn to the person next to you and name the 5 goals? Are you capable right now, today, early in the morning, before you've had a lot of coffee, of naming the 5 goals, the 5 standards? And they are? Who can call out a goal? They all start with C. They all start with C. Who's got some C words? Well, what's the big C word? Communication. And I'm so glad that you threw out culture first, because to me, can you really separate the two? So those two are our big C's in my mind. Communication and cultures. ACTFL does not see it quite that way in the way they represent it, but I think realistically language teachers do see it that way. There's 3 more. Anybody got any more C words?
Comparison.
Connections, comparison, and community. So those are our 5 goal areas. And notice that they are interwoven. Because when you think about it, what are you going to talk about? What are you going to read? What are you going to write about? Well, that's what the other goal areas give you. You're going to talk about, read about, write about culture. You're going to talk about, read about, write about other disciplines. You're going to talk to people in the community. So the C for communication needs the other 4 to have any meat or substance to it. What we used to do is we focused on reading, writing, listening, and speaking as if they were the be-all and end-all of the course. And we taught our students to read, write, listen, and speak many things that didn't matter. I haven't looked at a college textbook for its vocabulary for a long time, but I know what they used to be like. I studied German in college. When I looked at that, it was a very traditional extension of a high school textbook. And I said to Maria earlier, there's a lot of times that we have this disconnect between K-12 and 12-16, but I always like to remind the people that are teaching the freshman college courses, they were mine 3 months ago. Nothing miraculous happened. As a matter of fact, they may have regressed the summer between the end of their senior year and the start of their freshman year as they partied all summer for their last childhood summer. So really, they're not that different. So let's think about the clothing chapter. The typical clothing chapter in many books does things like this. What is she wearing? What color is her beautiful sweater? What color is her t-shirt? And then it does some really strange things. Are your pants too tight? When in real life would you ever ask any of those questions that I just threw out? If I point and say, what color is her t-shirt? Am I colorblind? Because I must be. And all of you have a problem with colors too, because otherwise it's a self-evident question that would never be asked in the real world. What are you wearing is a self-evident question, and are your pants too tight is just plain rude. So you have to look at your book and make sure that what it does reflects language the way it should be used in the real world in culturally appropriate ways. I mean, they may teach someone to say, how old are you, just because they do, and in some cultures it's inappropriate to say, how old are you? So we need to at least make sure that we are teaching language in that reading, writing, listening, speaking, the old paradigm, that is actually language that can be used appropriately out there. So we'll break these down, and I'm going to set communication aside and look at the other 4 first, just because I think they get neglected and they inform what we do. So cultures being the big one. But I did hear someone say reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And we no longer organize our thinking about coursework with those 4 words. Not at the national standards level. At the national standards level, we use the words interpersonal, interpretive, and presentational. And there's a very good reason for having made the shift. And it's this innate image that helps us to understand why the shift was necessary. So here, you have the word speaking here, and you have the word speaking here. So when we used to talk about speaking a language, it got confusing. And too much of the speaking we did was presentational and rehearsed speaking. Give a report. Prepare a speech. Show me your family picture and tell me about it. That's great. That's not inappropriate. That's presentational speaking. But the real speaking somebody means when they say, I took 2 years of language and I can't do anything, is that they can't have a conversation with someone, which is interpersonal speaking, thinking on your feet. So by reorganizing, keeping those words of reading, writing, listening, and speaking, but operationalizing them into how they are used. Now we can say interpersonal speaking, and we know it's thinking on your feet. Or it can be presentational speaking, what I'm doing right now. When we're writing in an interpersonal mindset, it can be a quick email, and we know it's interpersonal because we might have written it and hit send, and then a minute later think, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Versus a polished and thought out presentational writing piece. So that's why you hear this shift from the 4 skills to the 3 modes of how those skills are being used. And it has serious implications for teaching and for grade books. Because if your grade book captures speaking, what speaking are you capturing? In lower level courses, spending a lot of time on rehearsed speaking is a waste of time. Because when I went to Puerto Rico, I lived there a year and a half, how many polished speeches do you think I gave? 0. How many times do you think I struggled? Every day. So which one did I need to focus on first? I needed to focus on being able to survive and speak to another person. How much polished writing do you think I did in Puerto Rico? 0. Absolutely 0. Not in any way, size, shape, or form was I even ready to write the language to native speakers. It doesn't mean you don't do it in your classroom to get it started, but you want to keep everything in perspective. How often do you think I was reading or listening to Spanish? Every day, multiple times, lots of emphasis on interpretive. So that's a heavy visual. So before we go on, just turn and talk about it for 2 minutes. What implications does this have for you in your classes? Just talk this visual over. What is it making you think right now about language learning? I'll give you 1 minute to talk about that. You better talk, because I have ways of calling on you. I taught K-12 for years. It works better than raising your hand. You may not need that. Maybe your classes are nice and small. My last class in Indiana was 36 freshmen. Split lunch, 45 minutes before lunch, 45 minutes after. I do want to share with you one thing. Whether you have a small class or a large class, the research says don't call on volunteers. So have a method in your classes for calling on non-volunteers. Now, not cold. I just gave you a time to turn and talk. And if you were doing what you were supposed to do, everybody should have an answer. So if I had all your names on this index card, it would be very fair of me to pick on someone. But I don't want to do that in the first hour because you might start to resent me. But I will ask her, is there any questions that came up or comments that you would like to share for the good of the group? The other reason for having these is that when nobody wants to volunteer, you all have name tags on. Is there anyone that would like to share what you were talking about? Thanks. Because I was going to pick on you because I could read your name tag.
So we talked a little bit about sort of what interpretive means in the real world, and also about sort of interpersonal communication, let's say in an oral exam, where maybe it is better to have the students in pairs rather than having them talk with me, because they tend to do
better.
very presentational kind of stuff when they're talking to you.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit about that, but an interpersonal exam, you may not, according to ACTFL, be the partner. It's not interpersonal anymore. So you absolutely have to pair two students at random on the day of the assessment. They don't know in advance. They can never say, I can't do it today, my partner isn't here, or my partner is ill, or whatever else they might say. Good observation. Other things? Mm-hmm.
So in our group,
You know what, just, do you all know each other in the room? So before you talk, could you just always say your name? I'm so-and-so, so you'll get to know each other?
my name is Beatrice. So in our group, we discussed about the 3 modes, and we said they act as a guide to remind you, fine, I have this lesson. What were they? Did I have any interpretive task? Did I have any interpersonal task? Did I have any presentational tasks?
So when you're designing a lesson, you do an analysis to see, have I represented all of those? So by thinking about the big picture, you're starting to get that sense of how do lessons go together? How does it lead to assessment? And what was your name for the group?
Marina.
Marina. Anybody else want to check in before we go on? Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name is Victor.
Victor?
Yeah, I'd just like to add to the interpersonal issue that we talked about that in class, or we should make it as contextual as possible. Things that they do every day, so that once they come go out of class, they start practicing what they're taught in interpersonal.
And so that it's things you hear them talking about at their age every day. You can contextualize a lot of things. I said to a group of high school teachers on Monday when I was in Texas training some teachers that there's nothing wrong with the housing unit other than what's in it in typical textbooks, the rooms of the house, the chores of the house, and the furniture of the house. That's all that's wrong with it. Because the average high school student is not talking about housing at all. Their parents are paying for it. They are not about to read real estate ads for a long time. At best, they're thinking about where to live when they move to college, but that's not usually until their senior year. They don't buy furniture, so they could care less about furniture. And I don't know of any 14 or 15-year-olds that talk willingly about the chores they do. So if we switched housing to a homeless issue, we might get some passion around it. But we can't get it unless we have a context that is age appropriate for the learner in front of you. So let's go on and look at that most important one of cultures. We have two aspects of culture. When the standards were revised, they tightened this. So they really put in the word relating. They said all along that it was products, practices, perspectives. But when the revised standards came out, they said it's the relationship between products and perspectives. And the relationship between between practices and perspective that's important. It's not just the global generalization that all French people eat dinner late. That's an interesting fact that happens to be only partially true, but why do they do that? What is the reason for that practice? So we have to always think about that. So we have the cultural practices and we have the products. Now we've been really good at doing the products, the tangibles, the facts, the things you can touch and see, the literature, the art. Because that, frankly, for me as a non-native speaker of French, is a comfort level. It's really hard for me as a non-native speaker of French to start to talk about practices and perspectives. I might know a common practice from being abroad, but understanding why they do it requires a complexity I may not have. But I want to caution you, as native speakers of your language, that you're not as good at your culture as you may think you are. And I just want to give you this caution using the words of a very wise native French speaker I taught with in Missouri, who said to me, "Stop asking me what the French do." Now, why would a native speaker say that to me? Think about it. If you're a native speaker in the room, is that what you would say? Now, here was her situation. She had been in the United States for 20 years, was married to an American, and had lived in Brittany. Now, those of you that know France know that Brittany is a peninsula. Brittany does not consider it to be part of France, and France does not consider Brittany to be part of France either in reality. They have a unique culture and a unique language, actually, Breton. So she's saying, I know France from 20 years ago, from one regional part of France, and from the perspective of the values of my family. There's a whole French-speaking world out there in France that I don't know, have never interacted with, and please don't ask me what the current vocabulary is, because every time I go back, there are words I don't know, because they're new. So yes, you are good experts. You have a lot of expertise in your culture, but the very fact that you're already here means that back there it's changing already. Your language and culture is changing while you're here. So, and you have a limited perspective of where you grew up. So we have to be really careful. So let me give you an activity. Some of you have just arrived, I heard. So you encounter Starbucks. It's your first experience at seeing this nice modern Starbucks. It might be a less modern Starbucks on Main Street. What would you think in your mind? You're standing back and you're analyzing American culture. That's what you're doing right now if you're just arrived. It's what we do when we travel abroad. What are we thinking about Americans based on Starbucks? Have at it. Turn and talk. No, turn and talk. Turn and talk. she tried to call out an answer? I already know she's the A student in the room. And this is what's wrong with allowing students to call out answers. You will hear from the best and the brightest right away, and you will get a skewed impression in your brain of the learning that's taking place. And the ones that are not feeling confident will get worse. And you won't know it very fast. So it's really important to have procedures in place where you do turn and talk and then call on non-volunteers. But in this case, I'm more interested in hearing from some of you who are not English speakers and who are more recently arrived. How would you like to judge our culture by this icon of American culture that is now a world culture, right? It's everywhere. Yes, what would you like to say? We have thick skins.
Yeah. So, as a person who just arrived, I would say, wow, it's a nice building, nice AC building, clean. Everything seems so professional, high maintained. But looking at the prices of all the beverages, I'll be wondering, should I buy or not? Because even for a regular $2 coffee, I'll be thinking my currency. Maybe I can buy drinks for 2 weeks in my currency.
Yeah, like, are we all rich in the United States? Starbucks over here.
Hi, Salad from Kazakhstan.
Salad. Salad. And did you say your name first?
Kashika.
Kashika. Okay.
In my impression, I mean, when I first got here, it was 6 years ago. It was first time experience, not this time. So what I thought about coming into Starbucks, I thought that Americans are very rich. They make a lot of money that they can allow this coffee almost like. And then second thing that I thought that they don't drink hot things. They always drink cold things. So it was like kind of frustrating for me because they're all about drinking hot tea, like hot things.
So we have hot and cold there. And then back there, your name? And your name first?
Dale.
Dale?
Well, my first impression was that the Americans drink lots and lots of coffee. and mostly in and out, quick to go. They don't sit.
In and out and don't sit. Other things?
So Marina from Russia. Starbucks, you definitely mapped to having coffee, but my first impression was that the place looked more like a gasoline station. And it meant not cozy and unfriendly. When I got in, I understood that regular coffee was not in fact coffee, not the thing I was used to and I was expecting, so espresso. I had to go for an espresso.
I didn't negotiate a new menu.
I didn't think about the money, but plastic cups and people sitting on stools and working on their computers looked like take it and get out.
So Americans that are in the room, are we being pegged correctly or not? But this is part of what happens. You can't help but form impressions. Our job as educators is not to announce the truth, because we probably don't know the whole truth, but to make our young learners with impressionable minds aware that when they first look and they're good observers, they need to really be astute observers over time in order to get a true impression. Because yes, you have to have money to go to Starbucks, and in this picture you have to have a car to go to Starbucks, and there is an impression that it's fast and it's all about convenience. But the reality is that now that I'm retired, I know that Panera and Starbucks, there's a lot of people that go in there every morning. They meet, they sit, they talk. Because when my colleague and I were writing the book for ACTFL, I often went to Panera to work, so I would have no distractions, and I got to realize that the same people were there every morning as part of their coffee group. So it depends on the age, how you perceive Starbucks. And coming down this morning, I learned that 75 Starbucks are adding wine and beer and small plates so that they can now attract an evening audience. So here's a cultural icon that is evolving. And if you had moved abroad as an American thinking you knew Starbucks, You probably won't know about those 75 stores that are now experimenting with the evening market. The other thing is the false comparison that I might have risked making as a French teacher. That Americans are so rushed, they don't sit and enjoy. In France, they have all these cafes and people sit for hours. And look, it's such a better lifestyle in France and they just know how to live and we don't. We're always in a hurry. And then maybe I better remember that I took this picture in France too. So that's the thing about culture. We have to be very, very careful not to stereotype as we have these discussions or we present images, but instead design our lessons to let our cultural images be about language. That image could have taken a lot out of them. Where are they? When are they there? What are they drinking? What are they eating? What do you think? There is no right or wrong answer if you see culture as a way to talk and get language into your classroom. So you're thinking about using the second goal area to support the goal of communication, always remembering that in your lower level classes, this one's really hard to get at in the target language. So what are you going to do? You have two choices. Use English in your classroom, which is a no-no. So you know that the actual standard at all levels is 90% plus in the target language from day one, which means you can't switch over and explain it in English. So give them an article to read in English. Make that the homework outside of class. Because if you're teaching that 101 course, cognitively they're up here. And you can't get up here in 101. So go ahead, and if you've got a good reading or a good video they could watch, let them do that for homework. Then you can come in and organize the discussion in class. Because we can't wait for culture till our upper levels. That's the interesting stuff. Lest you think, how many of you in the room like grammar? Come on, be honest. Most people who teach languages like grammar. We have to accept that we're weird. We are unusual. We are different. The rest of the world does not like grammar. It's true. I know it's hard to understand that, but it's true. They do like this stuff though. So what you have to think about very seriously when you bring culture in your room is you got to get rid of the idea of stereotyping that French person to carry the baguette and drink the wine and wear. And don't forget the mustache. I mean, we got to have the mustache. Be really careful on this scene. Just be very aware of stereotypes. Has anybody seen the tattoo series on stereotyping? I don't think I put that picture in. I should have. There's a great series out there, and there's this big, bulky guy, and he just looks like a biker. And he's covered in tattoos. And I'm of a generation, and I have trouble with that. I'll just be honest. So I have to be very careful. Walked in to get my hair cut the other day, and a new hairdresser covered in tattoos. And I just said, how are you? Thank you. So, I mean, we just have to learn. It's just me. I'm old. But then it says, headline, this person could save your life. And the next picture shows him dressed for work. And you find out that he's a cardiac thoracic surgeon. And he's in his scrubs with a stethoscope around his neck. And we really have to be careful about our stereotypes because it's hard for us not to have our own stereotypes in this particular one. So if I look at Angers, anybody in here know Angers? Beautiful city in France. I studied there, so I love it. I always encourage you, if you're putting stuff into your curriculum, that you use things that you love. That you really use the things that you love and make them come alive. If the textbook has a different city and you've never been there, why would you even address it? You don't know it. Switch it. It doesn't matter to your students which one you do. Angers, if I just show you these pictures, that is a cultural piece of Angers. But from those pictures, what impression do you have of Angers? Feel free to call out the answer. I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's medieval. It's old. And I used to always teach my French students about Angers. It had an old cathedral and an old chateau. And inadvertently, I left the impression that Angers was an old city. It is considered the top city to live in France today. So there's a whole lot to Angers, and we'll look at it. But when you're putting a unit together and you're thinking standards, you do want to say, I'm getting ready to teach the unit on, and what is the key culture